covered in salt. Okay, good evening, everyone. I'm going to call the regular City of Prescott Planning Commission meeting to order, Monday, December 5th at 6 o'clock. Roll call, Dave?
Here.
Kate?
Here.
Steve?
Here.
John?
Here.
All right. Next item on the agenda is approval minutes for November 7th.
Motion to approve the minutes of November 7th, 2022.
I'll second.
We have a motion, a second, any discussion on the motion? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, next item on the agenda is a concept plan review for 1003 Campbell Street.
All right.
Take it away.
Good evening, guys. So this is the concept plan review for 1003 Campbell Street for the proposed Ace Hardware. The city met with Casey and Kayla Waltz, who are in attendance today. They're the owners of Waltz Ace Hardware in Ellsworth, Wisconsin. We met with them on June 20th, 2022. The Waltzes, along with Ace Hardware, are proposing the renovation and addition of the former Churchill Market at 1003 Campbell Street with the plan to open an Ace Hardware. Some property characteristics: the parcel at 1003 Campbell Street is 0.6 acres in size. It sits facing the T intersection of Campbell and Henry. It is currently proposed to keep the existing structure with the plan to add an approximate 4,500 square foot addition to the backside. The zoning classification: the property is zoned C2 highway commercial. The adjacent properties are zoned either C2 or R1. It is important to note that the main property that it abuts, try to get a laser here, is the post office, the residential property. The only little bit that it actually abuts a true residential property is, I think, about 30 feet here in the corner. The structure at 1003 Campbell Street was the former Churchill Market, and Tom Thumb prior to that has been a retail building for 30 plus years and has become a non-conforming parcel for the use. The proposed addition to the building would require it to come back to adhere to the current zoning standards. Here are the current zoning ordinance standards. It meets every setback, lot width, and the setback for parking that we have. The only zoning ordinance it does not meet is the off-street parking, the minimum off-street parking. Under the concept plan, it shows the 4,500 square foot addition on the backside and the existing building here. And then the parking, our current parking code requires it to have one space per 150 square feet of floor area. That would equal 56 spaces that would be required to have. The current concept plan displays a total of 21, 6 of which on the side are shared within the loading zone. Just to reiterate, it does not meet the zoning code requirement for off-street parking. It requires 56 spaces, and the proposed concept plan is 21. It is the city's concern that with a lack of parking, that safety hazards could emerge on the street and in other business parking lots and whatnot. A cross-access parking agreement was attempted with the nearby business to try and share parking, but the negotiations failed. And then we examined our nearby commercial establishments, and we found that our off-street parking requirements were not really adhered to in the past. We found that pretty much they average about 60% of our requirement, although this concept plan does only meet about 37% of our requirement. So with the lack of parking space available on the site, we kind of shifted the discussion to what Ace Hardware truly needs to accommodate their patrons. So we did a little review of Ace Hardware stores with similar qualities to what this site would have, which would be a standalone store, not located in a strip mall or shared parking, and obviously within the western Wisconsin region to try and keep it in context. This chart delineates our findings. We found that if you get a little bit more rural, parking becomes a little bit more sporadic and not really applicable to our situation. The Cumberland, Wisconsin Ace doesn't have a paved lot, so we couldn't really determine their parking capacity. And a lot of their stores, Ace doesn't really have a specific template for their stores, so a lot of their stores are unique in the way in which they're built. So it's difficult to determine a truly applicable situation, but I figured the Duran store, along with the Balsam Lake and River Falls, are the 3 smallest standalone Ace stores in the region, and each store has between 25 to 30 parking spaces. Although that comes with a caveat, some stores occupy their extra parking spaces with merchandise, which could be pavers or whatever else Ace may sell outside their store. So in summary, Waltz Hardware is looking to expand their business practice into the city of Prescott, and they submitted their concept plan. It meets all the zoning requirements except the minimum required parking. Staff is in full support of an Ace Hardware in the city of Prescott, but we're concerned about the lack of parking available to accommodate their patrons. And so that's why we have elected to bring the concept plan to Planning Commission for review and discussion. Right now I'll invite Casey and Kayla and their representative from ACE to come up and present some of their information. And afterwards we'll open it up for discussion with you all. So.
Thank you, Carter.
Yeah.
I'm Kayla, this is Casey. We've owned the Ace Hardware now going on for 1 year in Ellsworth, but previous to that we owned True Value. So
And that was about, we're going on 7 years total.
So we've been, Casey has worked at True Value since he was 15 years old. I won't tell you how old he is now, but he's very, well versed in the hardware industry. My background is in marketing. I worked at Treasure Island in a manager role for about 10 years. And just recently, this last few months, started helping Casey out at the store. So this is Brian. He's our rep for the area for Ace Hardware. Just a little background on Ace. We are independently owned. So unfortunately, I would love to be able to give you guys a bunch of data, like here's how much money all these, stores are generating in revenue that would increase your tax dollars in the county. But unfortunately, that information just isn't readily available because we're all independently owned. So,
And they're all kind of like Carter was trying to find the same size store everywhere. They're not. There's some that'll have giant store with 16 parking lots. It's just whatever fits in that community for them to thrive and to serve that community the best they can.
yeah. So I kind of threw up here a couple, or an inside of blueprint examples. So a lot of things that, Prescott doesn't currently have that would be, people would be shopping elsewhere. We would be having hardware, nuts, bolts, hammers, screwdrivers, all of that kind of stuff that you just really can't find in this area. Any painting projects, we would be having a paint hub here, salt for your driveways, salt for businesses. In Ellsworth, we have a lot of account customers, business-to-business account customers. So we would hope the same thing would happen in Prescott, so we could keep those people here and serve, those businesses and not have them go to Hastings or River Falls or anything for those needs. So we would definitely go with a cornerstone plan that ACE has laid out and what they would suggest, but we would also tailor it to what the community needs. Obviously, with Tractor Supply here, our farming, we would probably limit just because you guys already have that. So we want to offer what your community needs. Our community, we just moved to Prescott too. Just like 2 months ago, we bought a house here, so I guess it's ours too now.
So we weren't sure if we wanted to kind of spread that we wanted to come into town right away in case it didn't work out. But then we kind of reached out to some businesses downtown that we know of, the owners, and everyone's just, it'd be so nice to actually go to a spot and to get everything you need in one stop instead of running there. Oh, okay, now I got to go someplace else out of town to finish my project, and you're wasted half your day just driving around trying to get it.
Right.
And that's what we really thrive on in Ellsworth, is having everything to meet the needs of the customers and finish the project that they're started with.
And that's kind of the reason for the proposal of the addition to the space. What it's sitting at currently is fine. We just wouldn't feel comfortable, and along with our ACE team, wouldn't feel comfortable with building a store in that space. We just don't think we would have what everybody needs, and then that's a pointless store to us. There's no point to have you guys be, come in, shop, and then be frustrated we don't have anything. So that would be the reason for the addition, which then the problem that we're having, we would need more parking spots. So I just wanted to throw that up there that, that's our plan, is to have plumbing, everything that you can't necessarily find right now in Prescott. We just took a quick snapshot of our store in Ellsworth. the hourly, you know, the most that we're seeing each hour during a busy weekend for parking spots. Just an average of a few different weekends. The highest that we got was noon on a Saturday, which was 7 cars in our parking lot. So, and we also own the Part City that's next to it. So it's
Parts too, and that's counting
Both.
everything in there. And having the knowledgeable staff that can help that customer grab what they need in and out fast. Also, just huge this week.
Yeah.
It was buy online, pick up in store. So you guys can actually go and look at our store in Ellsworth right now, see what we have on hand, order it, have it at the desk ready. It's already paid for, gone. And we deliver to a lot of the account businesses too. Call in, need this, send it out the door.
So that definitely eliminates any parking spaces that we would need, and those transaction times with those buy online, pick up in store are so minimal. And especially with the new store, I think pushing that right away would definitely help in getting the word out in the area. Another cool thing Casey wanted to show, so we just became a silver dealer for steel, which means we have knowledgeable staff in fixing and repairing your steel products. And we have, you know, anything that you can possibly need for your steel, or we can order it and we have the access to. And we kind of we were looking, we're like, people are coming from all over, what's happening? And so we took a whole snapshot of, when did we start? Last year, of where people are coming from and registering their steel products that they purchase from us. And if you, I mean, just a quick look, it goes from the most to the least. So Kenosha's, I think there was a handful of people, but Burnsville, St. Paul, Prior Lake, Hastings, I mean, Prescott, I mean, people are driving to come to our store because we have the product that they need.
They
So
pass multiple steel dealers to get to us because we have it. So that's been kind of thing we're really, when my steel rep showed us that, we were kind of in shock of like, I mean, Wabasha and Kenosha.
Minneapolis, I mean, you're driving
Yeah.
you're driving through all these communities that definitely would carry it, but so that just kind of shows our knowledge and what people in our community or surrounding communities
Bring
need.
customers to town also, so.
See, that's kind of just the additions that to Carter's presentation that we had put together, but yeah, obviously the issue is the parking. We do not feel that it is an issue, just from our past experience, just from talking to other stores in the area, or other ACE stores in the communities. We think it's definitely a doable situation. I know the concern is, you know, ACE isn't getting the call, the city of Prescott's gonna get the call if there is an issue. However, since we are independently owned, we would take that, you know, heat off of it. It wouldn't be ACE. It's not like they're not part of the community. They're not, you know, sitting in these chairs or sitting on the chamber board. We will be those eyes and ears of those complaints, so.
And we hope to have a good relationship with the dental office next door. It doesn't matter how big of a parking lot, you're gonna have people park wherever they want. They park across Quick Trip and get gas and then run over, you know. You can't stop what they're gonna do, you know. If we have a good enough relationship with the dental office and say, we understand that there's gonna be some issue, you know, just hope there isn't gonna be a massive issue.
Right.
You just can't control people, so.
Anything you'd like to add, Brian?
And I just think, I'm Brian, I'm the district manager for ACE, and I have 32 different stores that I work with in my territory, and I can tell you from the bottom of my heart that Casey and Kayla, they run a good store, they care about their team, and one thing we didn't talk about is just the jobs that it creates in town. Because they employ locally and treat their team well, and I think it would be something that you guys would be proud to have in town, as far as how they operate, how they treat their customers and their team. I've seen nothing but excellence with their store in Ellsworth, so I'm sure this would be the same.
And he's only known us a year.
What was that?
You've only known us a year.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Cool. Tom is the building owner. I don't know if you have any.
Tom, Dave, one of the other owners is here too. Sure.
Oh, yep.
When we shut down Churchill with the opening of Quick Trip, that we actually had in mind a list of about 10 different types of businesses that we thought would be, number one, suitable for Prescott, and number two, be able to generate the revenue that we're looking for to at least pay the bills in the building, because we still own the building itself. At the top of that list, coincidentally, was a hardware store. And what happened is, shortly after we got the final confirmation from Quick Trip, everything went through, I cold called on Ace Hardware, Casey, in Ellsworth, and I remember you took me to the back office. I didn't know if you were going to yell at me or what you were going to do. And he goes, we've been looking at Prescott. We've been looking for a place to build a store, buy a store, something for 2 or 3 years. And I believe it was on a Monday. And I said, well, would you like to see the building? And he goes, let's go right now. And so about a half hour after I cold called him, he was looking at the building. Obviously, the existing building itself is about 5,500 square feet, but the core building is about 4,000 square feet. They said they need to be closer to that 7,000 square feet to make it a viable option. We would add on to the building by subtraction, though. So there is about a 1,600 square foot back area of the Quick Trip where the extra beverages and beer and stuff was kept. That would be torn down, and then a new addition that would add about another 4,000, a little over 4,000 square feet would be added on to it. But we were looking at this as owners that there's 2 things we were looking at. Number one, we obviously don't want to be writing checks for the building itself, because we still do owe debt on it. We'd owe even more debt if once we do the addition. But as important, if not more important, we're like, what type of legacy do we leave behind for Prescott itself? And we thought a hardware store in Prescott is something that we feel is appropriate for Prescott. We've talked to literally hundreds of people in Prescott, like, oh my God, that'd be the best thing that could possibly go in there. And our commitment to this is that we've sat on this building empty, even though there's a number of other businesses that have interest in the building. We've sat on this building for 6-7 months now in the hopes that we can get this worked out for a hardware store. And that doesn't come without a cost. I mean, we have commitments of $6,000-7,000 a month just with a building sitting empty. But we did that in the hopes that we can get this worked out with the city, and this can all work out for Prescott in the long term.
Yeah, a couple things I'll add too. We're willing to invest in the building.
Just say who we are first.
Oh, sorry, David Packard, co-owner. We're willing to invest in the building. We're not just, trying to fill a gap. We're going to invest a significant amount to make this happen. I've personally talked to probably 200 or 300 people in town. I don't even know that many people in town, and everyone is shaking their head at it like, what a great idea. Tired of driving to Cottage Grove all the time. I think everyone in the room understands it. I mean, we all need something quick on a Saturday, and it's like, you're investing 40 minutes. So I think it's a no-brainer. I think it's very positive for the city. I've been in River Falls the last 3 Saturdays at the Ace Hardware there, just kind of looking at it to see, well, what do they have for parking? Because that's a pretty busy store. And the most I've seen there is 8 Saturday morning. So I think it's a very good thing for the community, and I think it's important that we try to get it done. Anything to add?
No, we appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I got a question. Go ahead, Steve. The addition, so just to be clear, you guys are going to continue to own the structure and lease it?
We're going to continue to own it, to lease it at this point in time. We probably will set up in that contract an option to purchase at some point if these guys so desire.
Okay.
But we will continue to own it.
Needing that, I think you said 7,000 square feet total for the hardware store, the lot line setbacks have some extra space in the back, not much, but some. Is there any chance you could make the addition more narrow as to add more stalls down the side of the building? Kind of like a compromise?
We have Louis Ogden.
Could you ask come to the podium to answer, please, because we're on the air. Thank you.
We had Louis Ogden look at this every which way to Sunday, given the topography of the land itself, the site, of what you can and cannot do relation to parking. Short of putting in like a tiered parking ramp or something like that, which financially is not viable or feasible, it is what it is now. This is basically the maximum number of parking spots that we can get out of it. The only way that we just kind of spotted this in a pre-meeting is where we have the handicap parking right now. We could move that to the corner and have the handicap parking on that far corner where we're showing that truck if we shift the building a little bit towards the dentist's office, and then gain possibly one extra spot in the front of the store. So we could add potentially 22 spots, but other than that, it really is what it is, given the topography, because that back area does slope down quite substantially. And we're already looking at potentially a poured retaining wall on that backside just for the addition itself. So I appreciate the thought, but said we looked at this like 16 different ways to Sunday to see what else we could do with it.
And the 45,000 square feet, that's what you guys, that's, 4,500, sorry. Square feet, that's what is that what you have to do, like, to have it viable?
That's actually a little high.
So I guess when they're saying 8,330 square feet, we're looking at 7,000 retail square feet for retail. And I believe all the math is based off that 8,330. We need at least 7,000 square feet and the extra for storage in the back, office, what have you, to make it, we actually, ACE breaks everything down per square foot to see, is it gonna be doable for us, for ACE, for the community? And that's kind of why we could not go with that 4,000 square feet. And 7,000 was kind of the, I guess, sweet spot for what we could fit in that area.
The boulevard on Campbell Street, just right next door, the post office has 1, 2, 3 stalls that are parallel to the curb, and you'll be adding a curb. Could you add stalls there to be in line with those?
I'm gonna say no. That intersection is busy enough with Quick Trip. We don't need cars parked there and making that intersection even more difficult. That's my big concern. I know the parking it says we need more, and I don't want to put them on the street. At least that's my opinion. Again, I'm pretty vocal when I start talking because of that intersection. I think it's just going to get busier if Quick Trip and they become successful, be crazy. So I'd say no there, but I'm jumping on with Steve. First, I'll ask staff. I think how much green space do they need? Any?
I believe they were required to have 10% of the parking area as green space, which that is meeting that in that concept map per what Louis said.
Okay, so a couple different things. In reality, nowadays, everyone either shops online or they call, pick it up, and leave right away. So, the parking requirements are from probably back in 1970. 150 per, or one per every 150 square feet. Now that's another question I asked Carter only because that's my job too. Is it 150 square feet for retail space and maybe 300 for storage? Sometimes they throw that in because you're not going to have, customers back in the storage area. So, and you don't have to answer that just yet. So that's another question I have. But with order and pickup and delivery, do they need as many stalls? And if they don't, again, we should be, if our code says it, we should enforce it. That's my job as a building inspector that I do now. But in reality, if we're gonna adjust it at all, or do we change the ordinance to say maybe it's one for every 300 square feet? I thought, but then to tie to Steve quick if I can. I was thinking, if we decide that 20 might be enough, because we all know that Tractor Supply's not jam full, and even but tax as much park as they have, it's seldom they get full. This is below what our ordinance says, but I would say, like Steve says, maybe we accept this and say, hey, but you got a ghost plat parking that if we do have a problem, hopefully you would. But if you did have a problem where we have parking, maybe they add another 10 or 12 stalls, and I know there's a little bit of a pit, but maybe the parking lot is that part is on a slope.
Just like the next door.
So you know what I mean? So it's like, okay, we'll take 20, but in reality, we want 30 or better, just, and if it ghosted, could we get it in there? And that's where, you know, if like Steve said, do we shrink that building down, go back a little bit? I also worry about runoff, though. At this point, with the extra hard surface, we probably should retain some of that water on site. So a little bit of green space, a swale back there anyway to catch some. So that's just my thoughts, if we were thinking we wanna bring them in, and they don't meet the ordinance, we better have some backups to cover it if we think we wanna do that. Go ahead, Josh.
My thoughts on Friday when I was reading through this, where I was looking at all the ones, how, you know, what everybody else has, and that was my thoughts too. Tractor Supply, I mean, I've never been there and had that lot full. And then, I mean, have you guys ever been to an Ace? You walk in, they go, what do you need? And then they walk you right to it.
Yep.
I mean, it's not Menards, you're not pushing a cart down 15 aisles looking for one thing.
I also thought that was helpful with the Friday, Saturday, Sunday car count that you had, because I think that puts it into perspective as to what we'd be looking at most of the time, right? So, I mean, for me, that was really helpful.
Yeah, again, I work in River Falls, and so I have seen them full. How often? I don't see them overflowing into Wisconsin, who has an empty lot next door, maybe one or two. But the thing is we have an ordinance. You know, if we're gonna accept this and say we'll let them do the 21 or 22 and maybe ghost some if we think it becomes, you know, in case there's a problem, ghost it and say, okay, then within a year you have to put in. And then maybe we should look at our parking ordinance and maybe modify that.
Well, I'm looking at 4 stores that don't have enough parking, and guess what? They're not old and grandfathered in. They're all new. And we allow that.
Well, but that's what we should have, and that's, so what I'm saying is, and if they're not full,
Yep.
then our ordinance is probably outdated, and we should say, do we need, maybe it's a different number than our
Yeah.
count, and again, our, from 1970.
Well, it depends on the type of store too.
Yep. So, I'm just saying that it's not to say we should ignore ordinance, but maybe we should change it, and we've all seen the other stores, so.
One thing, if I may bring up real quick, and it's not relevant in the context that we didn't get an agreement with the dentist's office, and I completely understand, they just kind of want to keep their parking to their parking, ours to our parking, but as it turns out, you know, even we're looking at Churchill as an empty store right now, I mean, there's a lot of the dentist patrons that park on the Churchill lot, you know, during the week. And what the presentation that we were kind of doing with the dentist's office, and part of the reason was it's going to be sold in a couple of years to one of the dentists that's in there right now. But on the weekends, that office is closed. And that's when, obviously, the busiest of what a hardware store would be. During the week is when the dentist's office is the busiest and the hardware store is the least busy. So, I mean, it is synergistic, even though we don't have an agreement there related to parking. And as good neighbors, I mean, it's like, yeah, someone parks over on our side, like, big deal. Now, again, that's anecdotal, and it's not, you know, in writing, but that's the reality of how it's going to work.
Yeah,
Right.
that's fair.
Anything else? Any other questions, comments?
Carter, any thoughts?
I do not have any at the moment, no.
I go back at staff, see if they have anything, since we threw a lot out there. You know, as far as the concept, again, I'm a code enforcement guy saying, no, you should probably meet the code, but I do know codes sometimes get outdated. I would accept the concept plan, but I would still, part of my approval would be somehow that if they needed some, well, 2 things, I think they should retain that additional water that runs off. There should be a swale back there catching a little bit of it. Part of it's because the parking lot's gonna get bigger and then the building gets bigger. But do we say they have to go plat another 10 if they ever got that crazy busy, which I'd like to see that happen.
Where would you put it?
Well, they could bring it to the back there somehow. It's just, that would be a heck of a walk, but they could provide it on site. It's just, it wouldn't be as convenient for the customers, but it gets you in the door, and if you never have a problem, it's never gonna be an issue.
According to our engineer, he didn't think so, but just to be
Well, I could
transparent.
talk to Louis for you. Come on, Louis, everything's possible, it just costs money, but.
And honestly, part of it is we're trying to do this in baby steps. I mean, we, as owners of the building, don't want to invest another $50,000 into a concept plan until we at least know we have an agreement on the parking, because the parking, and I understand what you're saying, but the parking is what it is on this location.
But you could ghost one in there if you want to get it open and saying, I don't think it'll ever happen because we have enough parking because all the other Ace Hardwares do. It's not an issue, but if they get busy within the first year or two, yes, it's something that they have to worry about because they need the, you know, they have to demand. That's, of course, that's between your negotiations, but you know what I'm saying.
Right.
If it gets you in the door and we say you gotta give us another 10, if they're starting to park everywhere and we get complaints about your parking, then obviously they're probably doing well enough, they probably say, yeah, we wanna get more parking spots. Go
Can
ahead.
I ask what do you mean like ghosted in? Just
Well-
like plan, like
Or
they
you'd
have a
say,
plan?
if we needed to, here's the road, and then we put parking back here on the backside. And yes, it's a steep slope, you know, I know what Louis is saying, but it's an option that, in order to get it started, and they don't think they'll ever need it, well, if they feel like
If you don't think
confident.
they'll need it, they shouldn't have a problem with it.
Right, you just show it on there saying this is future if there's ever
If
a
need
problem.
be.
Yep.
It's, I think what it was, there wasn't enough parking, or enough room even to ghost it in there, because
turn it around or
you
something?
have like, you have to have in and out access, you have to have setbacks from the property lines themselves, and then obviously you need a certain amount of room from the edge of where a car would pull up to how far it backs out, and according to Louis, it just wasn't enough room.
Well, that's my only concern though then, is again, I hate this, 36% of what the code requires is way down there, it's not
Right.
even, you know, at least we had one at 50%, that's reasonable, and that's why I was trying to get you at 50, I thought if you had another 10, you'd be at almost 30, then you'd at least be 50% of what we proposed.
And I appreciate your attempt. I guess we, as owners of the building, we have to make a decision what we're going to do with the building at some point. And as I said, we've sat on it for 6 months now to get to this point so that, you know, we can make a decision.
What about that whole concept you were talking about if it's for the retail square footage and not for the storage? Would that get them up to the,
It's much closer because based on 7,000 square feet, I forget what the number is, but 7,000 square feet was quite a bit closer.
so if there's 7,000 square feet of only retail storage, then then it should be an issue because that back half is gonna be storage. So that would get them closer to the 50, wouldn't it?
I'll check it
It's
right
gonna
now.
be, yeah, it's gonna be,
7,000, divide that by 150, says you need 46, almost 47 parking stalls. And they're providing 20. And you still should figure something for the storage, just not.
21, actually.
I'd say 300, you know.
yeah, but it does bring the percentage up. You have just to go in at 10 stalls.
Yep. Understand that.
And I get your concern, I totally get how, yes, we wanna have that posted in. But I think, even for me, that Friday, Saturday, Sunday, there's only, the top is 7 people, or 7 cars, I mean.
So, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, that's just my
Okay.
point.
I had a question. What would be a typical hourly count on a weekend for you?
For vehicle
Customers.
customers.
Did you see that one?
That was like at noon, there's 7 cars. At 1, there's 7 cars.
Yeah.
But obviously from between noon and 1, they had more than 7 customers. People go there
Yes,
for
oh,
10 minutes and leave.
yeah.
Yeah, I guess I didn't personally count
Okay.
actual bodies in the
Yes.
store.
I'd say 20 transactions occur.
Yeah, I suppose we could look at transactions. Yeah. I'd say a good guess there between the 2 stores that we have in one building. That's a pretty good guess. Kind of want to bring up too that Matt and Carter kind of brought up to us that they are looking into changing the ratio of retail space to parking within the next year or so. I kind of want to hear what they would change it to and kind of bring it up to you guys if they have an idea of, they kind of know it's crazy right now. What would it be when they go to look at it again, when they go to change it?
So as part of our zoning code review that we got approved, that we'll be actually talking about as our second item, we have a couple items coming up that Bob's gonna lead us through. One of the things that we wanted to look at was parking requirements. In terms of what we would change it to, obviously that's a big discussion for you guys to have and kind of give to us. We would agree that, as Commissioner Hovel was saying, that we are over probably parked, and our code is pretty excessive. That doesn't mean it's not our code currently. That's ultimately one of the reasons why we wanted to bring the concept plan to you, to have all those factors into it. So I will say, and Carter, you can correct me if I'm wrong, unfortunately, one of the code, as we go through it is, I don't think it spells out specifically when you break it down, say, it's the overall use of the store.
Yeah.
Not like, okay, 20% is gonna be storage, so you factor that out of the parking requirement, so.
Yeah, I believe the term it uses is gross floor area, so it's pretty much measuring horizontal floor area from wall to wall.
So it assumes there's bathrooms and it assumes there's storage.
Yeah.
And that type of thing. I'm sure of that. My only concern, again, and I'm a building inspector, why do you have codes if you're gonna continue to just say, we don't care about them, they're desperate, they need a spot, and I'm not saying you're desperate, but they're gonna make it look as bad as they can so they can get the store open. That's their job. But our job is to say we have an ordinance, do we just not address it at all? Or do we enforce ordinances? Otherwise, again, we shouldn't have any ordinances. Steve and I had this talk earlier, less government's better, we all agree with that. Get rid of government and things might run smooth.
Sometimes the government's outdated though.
But right, and so that's why I say, do you say ghost plat it, and probably will never ever need it, but right now our ordinance says 60 and I'm trying to get it
You're a
close.
building inspector, do you use the latest and greatest code book?
We have to. Well, what do you mean, codes?
Yeah.
Well, Wisconsin don't, no, that's what you mean. Well, Wisconsin, but I agree with you, so I'm willing to negotiate, but it's like, do we still say you should go something? More likely when we find out that we need less, probably say that ghost thing won't matter. And again, if they never have a complaint, I would never see why we worry about it. But I like that little, we did know that if you guys grow too much and you have 30 people coming all the time, at any one time, it'd be nice to say that. Otherwise, it's, you get a complaint here, they're parking in the street, and it's a traffic issue. That's my only concern.
Well, the problem I have with your idea, not that I have a problem with it.
Well, no, that's why we have this.
At what point do we make them put more parking if need be? I mean,
Is it
now they get one complaint.
But one complaint, and that's just it, but that's just it, that would give us at least an option, say, well, once a year, we're not gonna complain.
Yeah.
Dennis said they have people, but if it's every
Every
weekend,
weekend.
someone's saying, geez, the traffic's terrible, then I have the option, say, hey, you have 5 cars in the street all the time.
Yeah.
Only put 5 of the 10 and then you got ghosted, that's just my thought. And if we find out they don't need more than 20, throw it out the window.
Sounds good to me.
That's kind of my thought.
Well, I think the problem goes back to what we already discussed, is that the building footprint being the way it is, when you talk about water runoff, you're talking about the elevations. We can have them ghost platted, but I don't think it's a realistic I don't think it would ever be realistic to put in.
Affordable. You can put anything in, it just costs you money.
But
We know that.
I'm talking about even regulation-wise in terms of, again, setbacks. Like, if you look at where the building footprint is, you can see on the side there, because the building shoots up, or there's not even a spot to put an access way plus parking. And even if you were, then you're talking about another X area where you have to build a stormwater pond. So you're having to come down and go into the back. I'm not trying to X-day that, I just want to be cognizant of the realism. If we ghosted, it might, it'd be hard.
Well, we feel comfortable not addressing our ordinance and just letting them do what they want. That's okay.
I'd be curious.
But just because you do something wrong doesn't mean you continue to do it wrong. I'm a building
That
inspector.
looks like we.
Well, we shouldn't have. We shouldn't have. Staff should have brought that to our attention long. Rob, just because it's done it a million times doesn't mean you continue to do something wrong. That's my only opinion.
I feel like that's a fair opinion. I feel like this is where, for me, when we're talking about in the next year changing this square footage and doing all this, that's where I have a hard time too, because then we don't wanna push this off for 6 months, Is there some way you can, I suppose there's no way we can expedite that whole change coming through?
I don't think they'd still be in compliance, they would just be closer.
Closer.
Exactly.
Well, neither is the tax tracker.
No, that's what I'm getting at.
quicker.
I don't have a problem with
Yeah.
those stores, and those stores are all brand new,
I know.
relatively. So I would make a motion to approve the concept.
I'll second that, actually.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the concept plan. Is there any discussion on the motion? If not, all in favor say aye.
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 Hi.
Okay, motion carried.
I wasn't just gonna make the motion is all.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you guys.
Thank you all for coming. Appreciate
Thank you for the discussion, I like it. That's why there's no king in the city.
My apologies, we're running out to our son's basketball game in Durant, so.
I know.
Thanks, you guys.
Yeah.
Rob, I didn't say.
Thank you.
Does that mean
Thanks, guys.
you don't get caught speeding, everyone keeps speeding?
Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
I know you do. That's my point.
I do like that you bring up like other,
Well, I love the line of discussion, because I know where Josh and you two are like, less government is better, and I agree.
I don't disagree with that.
Okay, next item on the agenda is zoning code review, chapter 635.
This was some good reading.
I skimmed
I woke
it.
up 5 times. Just kidding.
Sure, so as we already discussed briefly, one of the things that we approved back in June was the review of our zoning code in chapter 635. So Bob Colson with Cedar Corporation who accepted. We figured instead of trying to do all of this in one night and making an extremely long workshop or night, we'd break it into sections. And so Bob's here to talk about two of those changes that we're looking at and wanting to discuss with the Plan Commission.
Thank you, Matt. So again, my name is Bob Colson, and I hope to be seeing, well, I will be seeing you guys more than once. We have it's not a complete rewrite of the ordinance that the city is going through, but there are some substantial changes that need some oversight. And so I've been working pretty closely with Matt and Carter on these two sections, and probably I wanted to start with these sections rather than some of the others. You need to start somewhere, but one of these is probably controversial is probably a term that I prefer not to use, but it's the one that's on the screen, the ADUs, the accessory dwelling unit. That's something that depending on your perspective or understanding, it's either well we don't need it or it's well overdue. My job isn't to promote one idea over the other. My job is to bring you language that says this. If you want to do this, this is how you do it. You can say, well, yeah, we want to do it, but let's change this, and this. And so just so we understand, I'm here as a vessel to help you guys to get at what it is you think you need. And in the end, you say, no, we don't need it. That's fine. We'll just, it's no skin off of my teeth, that we presented something that the city says, no, we don't need. So with that, with that kind of understanding in terms of where we're at and where we're going, I can do this several ways. I mean, I've been zoning administrator for many years, and so zoning language and zoning, it's pretty clear to me. And so, but I don't know everyone else's background, and I don't know everyone else's feelings towards maybe some of these issues. And so I don't know how much you've read it, and I don't know if you need me to go line item by line item. I can certainly do either or. I guess I'd prefer to maybe start with just a little bit of explanation of maybe what's on the screen right now with the ADUs, and just to give some history or some background, just so that you have everyone is at least operating from the same foundation as we go forward. But so ADUs, accessory dwelling units, most people think of those as the granny flats or the mother-in-law suites, and post World War II, they were fairly common. I mean, it wasn't unusual for those things to be in and around, and it wasn't a big deal. After the war ended, there was a big boom, both economically and things just, and building wise, and things just changed. The residential component of life has changed substantially from from when it was kind of an accepted use to today. Things are pretty well compartmentalized. Now, whether that's good or bad, that's really for the city to determine. Currently, in just about every city across the nation, single family is single family, and which means that you get a single family house. You don't get a second structure. Things have changed, in terms of where we're at. The baby boomers have affected life all the way through. There's a lot of people that say, well, it'd be nice if I could have my mom or my grandma living next to me, and that's kind of what was the impetus behind ADUs. But I just need to have the city understand that as much as we would like to think that that's the only reason, grandma's not going to live forever. And so to expect that people would invest in today's economy, would invest in something like an ADU, and then when the family members are no longer there, that they're just going to pack it up and throw it away. Well, that's just not realistic, and it's not really a fair piece to say. Well, it's only good for family members, and it's I've heard these discussions and trying to figure out ways to kind of narrow the scope. It becomes difficult for staff if you say, well, let's limit this family members. Well, okay, well, who's a family member, and how do you determine that, and and how often do you check on these things? So I think that that ADUs, if you think about the housing market, and I haven't looked at the city of Prescott's housing market, but in the city of Menominee, where I'm from, last month there were 3 homes total for sale. There's a need for across the board, but there's a real need for affordable housing, and at least this would be a mechanism if you thought about it, that would maybe for a very small niche would provide that. One of the things that if you were to go down this path, and it's in the language, is that it's really meant for a particular use. It's not intended for large families. It's really, it would be, we're proposing maybe 700 square feet, 1 to 3 people that would be in there. But so it is intended for a certain use. But I get it, that it's different, and it may not be what the community is really ready to accept. So with that, I guess I would open it up to questions or comments, and I can scroll through to wherever you would like to land, and we can talk about any or all of it. So
I have a question. Okay, you make this mother-in-law apartment or
Sure.
whatever, and mother-in-law moves out, now we turn it into a rental. Okay, so then you run into parking. So now you're adding an additional 1, maybe 2 cars to your residential lot. Now they're parking in the street. Is there restriction in there about parking if you do this?
yes. So I think that's a great question, because it's intended to meet a need for people with 1 to 3 people. The ordinance, at least as it's currently written, says there would be 1 on-site parking space. That's it. So if you have 2 cars, you got to find somewhere else to park them, because you're going to get 1 space. It also says that if there is a garage, that counts as your parking space. Now whether or not the city wanted to get thumbs down and say, well, that's your parking space, so you can't park on the apron. Those are kind of the issues that you deal with. But parking has to be dealt with if you go down this path, and it has to be dealt with in a manner that it fits with the neighborhood, and is B, that the neighbors will accept. One of the big arguments, or the big monkey wrenches that people come in is, well, it's going to turn into a frat house, it's going to turn into a party house. It's like, well, one of the other things that you need to make sure is that it's owner occupied. That the person that has that ADU also resides there, and that when he's not there, that he can't rent out his piece, what is rental occupied. So there are ways to do it. Do people cheat? they cheat all the time. Is it something that you can't enforce? You know, your parking issue is a prime example. I had discussions with staff about parking. I don't know that we're going to be able to get down to a parking code that would meet 20 spaces for that big. But clearly your code is outdated, and we would look at that. Clearly your code may be outdated when it comes to looking at the housing market and where the trends are and maybe where the need is. And that's what we're just trying to address, so.
So just because I'm so new with this, is this new proposed, right? And I was
Yes.
not here for that, I did it.
Well, this is the first time
This is the first time you guys have seen it.
So just so you know, everything that's in the packet that you have, everything that is underlined in bold is new language.
New language, okay. And that's how you, and then the green, what is the green?
Well, that's pieces for me. I'm not sure what the code, you know, what the numbering is going to be. So that's there for me, just to make sure that if it goes through, what section is it going to end up at, those numbers, just so we can cross-reference and make sure that it fits in the code at the right space. Everything has to have a number in the code. But before we go through and number it all, if it's because everything after that gets changed, we want to make sure that we know just where we're at. So that's just a place mark for me.
If you were to do this, you're gonna have to change your zoning code from a R1 to an R2?
No.
No?
No. So it talks about that ADUs, and this is something that, you know, that I throw in for discussion, that ADU would be allowed in every residential district except for your highest density resident. There's really not a need for that. But it would also come in as a conditional use, and so there would be some additional oversight that goes with that. You know, and the thing, you know, with a conditional use permit is that if the permit is granted, and there are conditions that are placed on that permit, one parking space per, you know, additional parking space, and you find that there is a repeat offender, those can come back to the board, and that permit can be rescinded. And so there is some oversight, at least if it was a conditional use, in terms of monitoring what happens with it. Yes, ma'am.
So I have two questions, just reading through this. How are you going to make sure that, like, the people residing there are not exceeding 3? Like, unless there's a complaint or something? Okay, then that's how you.
It's the same, yeah, it's the same way that the city finds out about, you know.
Anything else.
Yeah, I mean, the staff is not going to go around counting noses. You know, they have more important things to do than that. But there are minions that are on staff that are unpaid, that will call and say, you know, this is happening. And I can speak from firsthand experience, you know, of a complaint comes in, and you have to follow up on the complaint. So that's traditionally how it happens.
Quick question, so you say it can be in any zoning district,
Residential,
no public hearing required,
conditional use. But I mean, these are all for debate. Yeah.
enough neighbors object, it could be shot down?
Well, there's a public hearing will be required for the ordinance, you know, to come in. But so yes.
Conditional use permit does require a public hearing for everybody with
A public
100
notice.
Square public, I think it calls for a public
Yeah.
hearing.
Okay.
I thought it was public hearing, I'm not sure.
So if somebody wants to put this in here, you'd have to have a public.
Your board of adjustments. That's
In your
typically
backyard, you
where.
have to come here. Yep,
Okay.
yep. And now Matt, I know Matt and I've talked a little bit. I know people are buying houses and converting them into duplexes, number one. I think they need a building permit because then they need to build building code, but a lot of people aren't doing that and they're slapping in, next thing you got a duplex. And that's kind of what control this, correct, Matt? That's kind of what we're thinking of?
Well, I think what came about when we started looking at the code and we were talking with Bob is that more and more people are interested in doing accessory dwelling units, whether it be in their basement or adding a building in the back. So the thought was, well, why don't we bring this to Plan Commission to see if there's interest in us keeping this? And so I think in this, at least for this particular one, where Bob did a really good job of putting together some language that would make it so we could do it, and then we wanted to know your input of, do you want to move forward with this, or do you want us to scrap this idea?
And I think it just controls, because I know people that buy them, they convert it and probably don't get a permit. Next thing you know, we got a duplex, and they should at least follow some requirements that add that parking stall or percentage is owner occupied. I like that part of it. I know.
And they need to live
That's,
in
yeah.
the dwelling.
Yep, they can own it and rent both of them. I agree with that. I know the positive side of it about adding granny flats, which I'm not a fan of granny flats, but the positives, you eat up less farmland. Enough land is getting eaten up as it is. This kind of controls it. Makes houses more affordable.
But it's important to understand that in the long run, they're going to evolve into a rental unit.
Oh, sure.
I mean, so we need to understand that just right up front.
You're just high density. You got the neighbor, every neighbor around you could have 2 living units, which is just an extra person or 2 and an extra car or 2. And there is that. That's the downside of it. But you eat up less farmland, make things more affordable. People are gonna make a little extra income to pay their taxes. Of course, they gotta pay more taxes because they got another house, but I read through it. I didn't think it's a bad thing, I guess.
You think it is or is not?
No, I don't think it's
Okay.
the worst thing. I'm not a big fan of granny flats, but it is a way of, like say, I'm single and I want to just move into a nice 700 square foot and I just rent and go south for the winter. It's not bad that way. There's positives to it, but I can see negatives. Just more crowding. It's more cars, more density that somehow my neighbors ain't, another person in the backyard, they normally just put a 6-foot fence up anyway, so who cares?
You could say, God, the neighbors moved in, they got 6 kids. I mean,
As long as it's still, you still have the, 30 or 40%, can't.
Yeah, there's percentage I
Yeah.
can keep it at a certain size, and I
Yes.
like that.
Yeah.
Parking, it's parking and occupant load, now that is, your neighbors are gonna help you control that.
Well,
So
absolutely.
I read through it and I didn't mind the idea of it all. I would like to see it
So,
refined a little bit.
out of curiosity, what's in front of us here is adding the highlighted changes, right, and not this publication. This publication is written and
This is all new.
that's all.
This is all new.
All that underlying stuff is brand new.
It's all brand new. Does not exist anywhere in the city.
Don't have an ordinance or anything for this, right?
For rentals or.
I'm kind of shocked that we would allow 2 residents on one parcel in this town, that so many of these properties are so tiny.
But that's why they get a conditional use.
Well, yeah, but it also says that you can't create a non-conforming situation for this, so they'd have to meet the setbacks, they'd have to meet everything else in the code. If they don't meet that, it's like anybody else. Well, then I'm sorry, unless they ask for variance, then they don't get that. And so it would have to be compliant with the district and whatever in the
Or
district.
different rates, like my little house, I couldn't really add anything to it, but I could take my basement and rake a rental out of it. That's what this allows.
It does, it would.
Like you ripped down your garage and built a new one with living quarters above it.
Right, you can do something like that.
It does require, that if you, so there's 3 types of accessory dwelling units. There's one where it's a standalone, the granny flat, and I think everyone understands that. There's one where it's the accessory apartment, and so I have a home and I add or remodel space so that it becomes a functioning unit, but it has to have its own separate entrance, and so there are other things that have to go along with it, and it's restricted in square foot or size depending on what it is. And the other one is if I have a garage that I can maybe remodel that to have space. But then in talking to staff, some of the concerns were like, well, getting too tall in a neighborhood may be an issue, and so there's language in there that says that that the height of whatever you would do would be restricted to whatever the principal structure is or on that lot, so that you get things that are going to be that fit with the neighborhood, and that's really important that they have to fit in the neighborhood. You don't want that sore thumb because it's just going to cause problems. I think I touched on an issue with height maybe somewhere, but.
Well, I'm gonna say, the change I want is, it's not called an accessory apartment, it's called a duplex. Because the building code is gonna call it a duplex. If you have 2 units in one building, it's a duplex. You don't have an apartment, because then that falls in the commercial code. I'm being a building inspector, so I don't know if Todd being the city's building inspector, it's a duplex, it's not an apartment. It's 2 units under one building. Just FYI, my way of looking.
Yep.
Okay, but then what if someone wants to put a separate granny flat, then what would you call
That's
it?
that's a granny flat.
That's
then. What do you
detached.
call it?
It's a cottage, it's an accessory cottage.
Okay, or like a small house or something.
700 square feet, we're talking, I mean, and that number is.
Could be 400, could be 500.
It could be whatever the city thinks is reasonable for this type of use that you're trying to provide. So maybe 700 square feet is more than what you think a person needs. It could be less, but something to throw a dart at here, so.
So when you're talking about the detached accessory apartment, that's what you want to be called the duplex?
Well,
Right.
it would
That's
be.
what you want to be called the duplex?
And attached,
Well, oh.
no,
it's not-
detached is different.
The accessory apartment would be, what we've defined in the ordinance right now as an accessory apartment would be what people would consider a duplex, because it is two functioning
Okay.
units. I mean, the ADU is a fully functioning unit,
And then the detached one would be like if someone put a living quarters in above their garage. Okay, I just want to clear that.
yeah.
I think it's a good idea.
I like the idea.
I do too.
I got a question. So we have city ordinances that say you can only use so much of your green space or whatever penetratable space.
Yeah.
And so that's gonna limit the size of whatever auxiliary structure you have.
Yep.
Also, I don't think I'm excited about the maximum 300 additional square feet for a garage. So if you have an auxiliary building and then you can only have a maximum of 300, that seems very
Additional.
restrictive.
What we're trying to figure out is what does it take to put a car in, just a
That's like a tiny one stall.
Well, oh,
And nobody should build a one
I'm-
stall
I'm-
ever again in
I-
the history of man.
But if you're only allowed one person in that rental,
I'm
They have a
trying to
lawnmower
keep it
that's
as-
gonna sit outside, they have a,
no, the owner occupies, the owner probably has a lawnmower, that person
well, I'm
is
just saying,
detached.
they've got
Bicycles.
a bicycle, they're gonna sit outside.
Well,
Like,
300 all of these are numbers that are just probably absolute minimums. And are they as functional as they need to be? Maybe not, but those are the discussion items that you need to have. I mean, so
So, looking at the lot sizes of this community, an auxiliary structure, which seems gonna be, it's gonna be the biggest, challenge. I think the neighbors are gonna hate it the most, a duplex within a structure, that just adds cars, there's a couple of challenges to that, but if you got a whole nother house in your backyard, you're really gonna, throw some flags. And so, the ordinances that restrict your absorbable space and like how big of a structure can you gain, I would say is there any way we could just take away the minimum or the maximum numbers, because they're gonna be dictated by the other ordinances? Does that make sense?
it does, to some degree. To some degree, it does. But for the person that has a big lot, I mean, trying to level the playing field and trying to meet the need of affordable housing. And this isn't intended that you can put another giant addition on. It's intended that it's for 1 to 3 people. And so, that's what it's intended to meet. And so I think that if you believe that it's for that market, then I think that maybe putting some boundaries on how big is big, because otherwise 1 to 3 people would say, well, I need a big game room, and so it's like, and but I'm okay to whatever the city wants. It's written according to maybe what a lot of other ordinances have done, and it's really written so that it will fit in the neighborhood. It does restrict it to the number of people, the number of bedrooms, the square foot, and the number of parking, just so that it doesn't become on paper it doesn't become problematic. But those numbers are all up for the city to figure out how big is
Having a
big.
one-stall garage put on any structure, I just think if it's gonna be a dwelling, they're gonna have bikes and they're gonna have, and then it'll just sit outside, it'll be an even bigger
And then
challenge,
how
so.
do you put, let's say you make this a 2-story, right? How do you put 700 square feet on top of you?
Yeah, I don't know. Right, I am not in love with the numbers.
If we were
Can't leave her out?
Within the city of Prescott, there's not a lot of big lots that are gonna build a monstrosity they won't be able to. Most lots are 3rd-acre, half tops,
Yeah.
Obviously. there's
I'm okay with
exceptions.
whatever number you folks want to put a pin on this.
Well,
Limited size.
My thought though, part of it is that Granny probably doesn't have her bicycle, maybe her walker, but so that's really kind of what part of this is for. But my thought is, everyone now understands what he presented. I think if you have it, why don't you chew this up, throw it back at Carter, and at the next meeting we can start narrowing numbers. And the other thing I could ask is maybe you just do a lot, 66 by 132, some of the old lots, some of the new ones, and just draw what it would look like. and how much coverage that'd be, just a simple little drawing, and get it to the commission for next time. Would that be helpful?
Here's another idea.
Yep.
You know, instead of having these set numbers as maximums, I cringe at that, and especially like the garage because of all the reasons I've listed. But couldn't you like create a table, if you will, that if your lot's this big, these rules apply to you. If your lot's that big, numbers wise, because obviously you don't want a monstrosity on a tiny lot, you know, but then you don't want a big lot creating a monster because there's no limits other than absorbable space limits and setbacks.
Unless you did a percentage of the rear yard, you just say from the back of the house to the lot, you can go up to 30% of your rear lot. If you got a small lot, it's gonna be 300 feet. If it's a big lot-
Right.
Maybe you can't do squat.
And that's what I mean.
But that could work though.
But a couple
because-
examples, I think if you could throw it and give you percentages, and you could even figure out percentages for the most part, and then we could talk about it at the next meeting. And and then maybe narrow the numbers down once we kind of get, or percentages instead of numbers.
I just think if you're gonna be adding an auxiliary structure, you must have a decent lot. And if you're adding an auxiliary structure that has a one-stall garage, it's gonna be a dwelling, I think that'd be a mistake. And the way this is written, I don't think.
And I just said, if you were king, we'd agree with you, but you're not, that's why I say, so throw that out there, and I agree with you somewhat, you know what I mean? It's like, I'm not a big fan of granny flats, and yet I see the need for them, because I'm a building inspector, you start cramming everybody together, pretty soon it's all the rats that start chewing at each other.
He's been at this a while.
So I don't disagree, but I just think let's throw numbers and get throw some of your concerns to Carter, and I can take them to you, and then just throw some examples out that can visualize them a little bit more. And then at the next meeting, we could hammer it out better. You weren't thinking of finalizing this tonight, were we? I think so. I didn't think so. That's why I say that.
No.
Otherwise, we could sit here all night and kind of pick a little bit, but let's just all throw them in. As
I get the gist of it, like what we're trying to do here makes sense. It's just I don't wanna put black and white that we're gonna restrict it to inadequate space, you know.
That's why I think he just threw a number down there. We would make it so it's reasonable. Like you say, you're not gonna put 700 on top of 300.
Yeah.
So that makes sense. That's my recommendation, but I'm just a commissioner.
That's typically how I work, so,
All right, so any concerns, throw them at Carter, and then Carter, and you can throw something together and give us some visuals for next time.
So were there any other questions that you have, as long as I'm here about this, that I can answer or that go through with it right now on this piece?
Not this one.
Okay. So the other section that's before you is for some solar energy systems. There's been a lot, I don't know, that's kind of a relative term, but there's been interest in other cities and other communities for solar farms, for solar communities, for just solar energy. And I don't know just how much interest there has been in Prescott, and also, the scale of these things. So what this ordinance tries to do is it talks about solar energy at different scales. The residential scale is putting stuff on top of a roof, as long as that roof can support it. Doesn't pose a problem. Once you take it off the roof and have it on a pole or something, well, now we need to be concerned about how it looks. Maybe not so much how it looks, but just how much where it is, and setbacks come into play. And then you turn the corner, and then you get to what is community solar farms, and where it's of a certain scale. There's a limit on how much they can produce, but people would buy into it, and then you get some money back on it, and what you don't get back, they sell back to the energy. And then there's just the industrial, or there's the people that just make it just to sell it. So there's three different scales, and so like I said, the residential one, if it's on a roof, we're saying that doesn't need a permit. Still needs a building permit, doesn't need a zoning permit. Everything may still need a building permit. But they haven't changed the footprint, they haven't changed the use, so I don't know that there's necessarily a zoning permit required. But as soon as you take it off the roof and start putting it on the ground, now you're going to need a zoning permit, and you're going to have to start figuring out, making sure it meets setbacks and such. there was also, because someone brought up, that you have a green space requirement, and I'll be working with staff to figure out just how to, if we need to modify or reword that so that it's equitable. We're going to do that, but for those pole mounts, it's like, well, that probably would be exempt from that green space. But if you are putting up a community solar, where it's more than just for residential use. Now there's a lot of other things that we think come into play. We need to understand that a lot of those are going to happen, and somebody brought up that ADUs might be good because it's going to take up less agriculture space. A lot of these larger scale solar farms, they're leased on ag land, and some of the things that have come about problematic is, well, there needs to be a fence. So we've suggested that there be a fence, but it needs to be wildlife friendly fence. It's so that it's open at the bottom, so things that need to get in can still get through. Also, that if it's going to be there, that you may think about having it attractive pollinators and stuff. So you got this big place that's going to be leased as a solar farm for 20 years. There's an opportunity to provide some other things to the community that you wouldn't normally get. All of these things have a life. Everything has a life, and so one of the other components on here is that there needs to be a decommissioning plan that would come into play, so that the city is protected. That if and when it goes out of business or is no longer functioning, that there is a plan and some money set aside to take care of decommissioning the darn thing, and because it will happen. So those are kind of the pieces, and then and there's some other definitional things in terms of how these things work. But so it's kind of three scales. It's a residential scale. There's the intermediate scale, which could be business and maybe a community, and then there's the generating one that's just for hundreds of acres, and so that's what it's trying to get at, and the last piece is that in terms of, we're also looking with staff to do an overlay for a PUD, a planned unit development, is that if you have a planned unit development and there's a solar component, it gives you the opportunity to maybe put some other conditions on that would really benefit the city in terms of getting some net zero benefits from a solar farm out of that. So try to take a very global look at this for you, and again, we can expand it. It can be contracted. It can be moved around. But I just wanted to be able to explain maybe the components and maybe what's in there to spark some additional discussion or to answer questions.
I gotta admit, I didn't read this very in detail. But now that I got a background, I like the idea. I think you gotta at least have some restrictions so they aren't throwing solar farms up, everywhere. And
they are coming.
We don't want them everywhere.
And then if they were pole mounted, like within the city's limits, don't we have a requirement that you have to have enough room if the pole falls?
Setback as far as
take out your neighbors.
There'd be a height restriction on it, but there's also a setback restriction that they got to meet. And those pole mounts for that would be residential uses. I mean,
Right,
once yes.
And we have nothing
Yes.
at all right now, right, Carter? So I think we definitely want something like this. I would review it more, and I might throw my 2 cents back at Carter later.
Yeah. But there would be a height restriction and there would be a setback restriction, and if we need to tweak that so that make sure that it falls on your property, that's not a big deal. So yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, I don't have any input on it now, just 'cause I didn't read it detailed enough, because that's way too exciting.
Okay,
for me.
anything?
I've got nothing. I like it.
Okay.
So get something to Carter if you do read it and throw something at him and kind of go from there.
Yep, and then I plan to be here, on an as-needed basis. I'm not necessarily going to say every month, but there's a fair amount of work that we're doing with your ordinance, so I think that you'll see me several times here before you and working with you. So I appreciate the time. And any.
Thank you, appreciate it. Do all the work that you did.
Yeah.
Very good.
All right.
All right. Is there any other business?
Just a reminder that next meeting will actually be on a Tuesday because the first falls on a Sunday, so second is a holiday. And just if you aren't going to be in the next one, we've got quite a bit of interest now. The letters went out for our comprehensive plan amendment change, so we'll be holding our public hearing on that 3rd. So if you aren't able to make it, please let us know as soon as possible just to make sure we have a quorum.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
You're adjourned. Good discussion.
Yeah.
Thank you, everyone.